back to the main stage, friends. I'm Michelle Zych, she, her, and I have the outrageous honor of serving as the chair of the board of directors for the Women's Funding Network. I have to say that from the moment our fearless leader, Elizabeth, opened the day and shared her story and invited us all into crushing on every single speaker and taking furious notes. Melanie and I have been texting back and forth some of our favorites all day. Melanie, tell our friends how you are processing this incredible day.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I am Melanie Brown. I also use she, her pronouns, and I'm the proud vice chair of the Women's Funding Network Board of Directors. First, let me say, Michelle, it's so lovely to see you. Yes, we have been texting all day, but it's good to see you via camera. And I just always love this opportunity to be together with my Women's Funding Network friends and all of you who've joined us today, even though, of course, like everyone has been saying, I wish we could be in person. I am processing so many things today about my own work in philanthropy and my place in feminist movements that really have been a beacon of light in a time that feels just flooded with chaos and confusion. And I too am just so immensely grateful for Elizabeth and her leadership. This conference today has really woven together feminist history with the present movement and given us a roadmap for where we must go in the future. We talked about women in Afghanistan, girls' health at the US-Mexico border, the ongoing fight to protect our voting rights, and the lineup. I mean, A-list does not even begin to describe it. We truly are the ones that we have been waiting for. I'm grateful for all that I have learned today and all the new and old friends I've had the chance to connect with. And really so excited about the book that I received in the welcome box, and that we're going to hear from author Jamia Wilson, who I had the pleasure of attending undergrad with and already knew 20 years ago how amazing she was, and also illustrator Aurélia Durand. I'm really looking forward to reading this book with my 3 young nieces who I hope are budding feminists. And although they will probably want to create a TikTok dance to go along with the book, I think this is exactly what they need to be reading. So I'm really just energized by today. I can't believe we've already gotten to the end of the day and the final conversation. Michelle, but I have a question for you. So we've served on the WFN board for 3 years now. I remember us being there together at our first meeting. And in that time, we've seen a leadership transition for WFN, followed almost immediately by the pandemic, unprecedented calls for racial justice in the world today, and increased urgency on attention and action on climate change. And so as you close your time out as chair, not to get sentimental or sad, but what will you take with you about this moment and about our work? And what are you most proud of?
Oof, all of the things, Melanie. I would say, like many of you, I don't think I realized how much I actually needed this day and this space to connect and learn and be inspired, despite the multiple pandemics that our communities continue to face. I'm incredibly proud of how this community has shown up. Last year, Elizabeth and her brilliant team at the WFN immediately pivoted to ensure that our members were heard and supported through strategy, funding, and solutions. The WFN board really took leadership and the time to build transparent and democratic leadership to build a stronger organization for the future. Women's funds and foundations took the lead in their communities to push for effective policies and funding strategies that address critical issues impacting equality and justice for all genders of all races. And all of this, quite frankly, while judging uncertainty and grief and joy. And I know personally for me, whether or not to wear a real bra for this Zoom call. The WFN is well positioned because of our trust in one another, our support for one another, and our shared sense of abundance and opportunity, and to just really do big things in the coming years. As Elizabeth said this morning, together we fight and together we win. All that said, Melanie, it is good to see your face. I wish I was seeing your face in person, so let's figure out when we're going to hang out.
Yes, let's do that soon. Let's bring all of our friends with us, of course, safely. and in ways that we can just share in person all the great things that have already been shared virtually. Everyone today, again, thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you for just being supporters of WFN and the work that we're doing. We're really grateful, and we hope that you've joined this day, enjoyed this day, and just are really grateful to be in community with you. Thank you.
Hello, I'm thrilled to be here today. I am Jamia Wilson, author of This Book is Feminist, and with me is my fantastic colleague coming to us from France today at a very late hour. So thank you so much, Aurélia Durand.
Hello. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so glad that you're here. We work together across the seas on This Book is Feminist, and we have had a pretty good journey together, writing and illustrating in Aurélia's work what feminism means to us. And we wanted to have a discussion about why we wrote this book and how we use art and creativity to make change. So I wanted to ask Aurélia, how has your feminism informed your journey?
It's a good question. I think I started to illustrate as a way to express myself, to show who I am as a woman, and especially as who I am because I lived in Denmark, and the question of identity always came, and people see me as when I speak, you hear my accent. I'm French, so people relate to French, but they don't relate too much on my other side, my African side, which is coming from my mom. And everything I know about my African heritage comes from my mom, and it's how I identify myself actually, through my mom and her experience as a Black woman. And she always told me to get an education and to be strong and to, believe in my competencies, because she never had any education. So she wanted me to get the best. And so I think, I guess, like, the way I feel as a woman is to, spread good vibes and spread messages through my art, and bring everyone together. And that's also what I try to do with the books I work on, or my illustrations, just generally.
I think that's really beautiful. And I think although we've talked about our origin stories before, and we've talked about the influence our families have had on our lives, that gave me even more of a deeper insight into why we need to focus this work on young people and youth and education, why we both were given strong foundations of understanding the power of knowledge, and why this offering that we have for the next generation is an example for us to be able to educate and inspire. I love how you spoke to about spreading good vibes and with your art. I love that you use bold color and have a really distinct voice and style. I feel that that communicates to readers that you can be who you are, and you can also care about serious issues and values while also holding on to joy. And I think that's really beautiful. And celebration, feminism as a celebration is a big part of that.
Yes. To change the way we see, we talk about these topics, and that's why it's such a it's so popular, because it's catchy, and I don't know, it's just like more, it's easier to reach out to people with joy, colors, and you know, also to bring empathy and just like, yeah, I don't know, to attract to catch the eye of people. And that's also how I started. I used bold colors to catch the eye of people, to create a joyful protest. Because I think that whenever I was talking about this topic, like feminism or anti-racism, people always get frustrated. It never ends to a nice conversation. And for me, I want to make it as something easy. Yeah. Something more, I would say, like easy to speak about, or something you don't want to get away from the conversation.
I love that, because I think, you know, and it's amazing how we, although we are in different places, different continents, you know, we are engaging in a lot of different ways. We are connected with a passion of feminism and intersectional feminism that honors all of the different identities we hold, like you spoke about the many identities you hold, and also their power. So one thing that I think is really important as we think about everyone who's with us is to think about what it means to expand the conversation about who is at the center of the story. And I feel like what you said about making it accessible and easy for people to become to become a part of it is extremely important. I felt like when I would get your art in an exchange or an email after I shared some writing about both statistics, personal stories, or ideas about theories, I always felt like my conversation in my mind was expanded by seeing your art. And I feel like that's the conversation that I want to see happen with people who read our book, that because we are different women who have different stories and some things that do connect us together in similar experience, but other things that are different, my world is expanded by being exposed to your world. And when I learned we were writing together and working together, I thought a lot about you in it to say, oh, am I talking in a global way? Is this book only focusing on American women? Is this book only going to resonate with people who've only seen what I've seen? And so I think that there's something about that too that feels very special to me. Like you said, like the ease is important, that the invitation we issued out through this book is what excites me.
But I could relate a lot with your story and your teenagehood. Yeah, I could relate a lot. It's different. I grew up in the 90s, but still I could see how you like you were a fan of Kurt Cobain and all of these bands from the 80s, and it's funny how you've been, how all of the stories about you really also made myself very sensitive, and I wanted to illustrate your story the best way I could, especially because you talk a lot about your family, and it's and all of the things you got from your grandmother, your mom. I felt it was very beautiful, and I was almost crying sometimes. So I was trying to bring that also, like this feeling of I don't know, like about life. Life is colorful, and life is about sharing and yeah.
Oh, that moves me so much. Thank you so much. It makes me so happy, because I really felt that. So I want you to know that too, that I really felt that you understood the resonance. And I was thinking of you and your family too, as I was learning of your story, but also just some of the nuances of things that you would put in the art. Also, I really appreciated throughout. And I feel, I wish we could talk about this all day. I can't believe we're close to wrap, but I guess I want to say to you, when you said about illustrating a story, one takeaway I have for those who are with us today is when we have a lot of power in telling our own story, but also those of us who are organizing and doing work, and we're telling the story of multitudes who are impacted by policies, communities, organizing we're doing, that it's important to take the kind of intention that Aurélia demonstrated, and that those values of intentionality that she had around what does it mean to illustrate the story of a community and others. And you did that with such great care. So I'm just thinking about that and the metaphor, and just thinking, I thought about that a lot, whether I was writing about Saudi feminists who I encountered, or also writing about the women in my family who are no longer with us, who've moved on to the next realm. But also to think about, how do I hold their stories with words with the greatest intention and honor them in the way that you honored them with your illustrations. So I really thank you for that.
Thank you for writing the story. I think it's very cool, and the teenagers are lucky to read your story and be inspired, I think.
Thank you so much. And I feel that about you. I wish that when I was growing up, I could have followed you on Instagram and seen your art and seen your beauty, and how you are celebrating. I think that's what I love. Yes, there's so many traumas that we hold. There's so many stories that we hold that are painful, and generational stories that are really painful, but there is a lot to celebrate. And so much of what to celebrate is also the vision for the future, and also the resilience of our people, and the power of community. So I just want to thank you for holding that. I always know I can kind of go on your page and get a burst of light to remember. We can still dance. We will dance at the revolution, and I think that's very important.
Yeah, to keep being positive and see the future bright.
It's beautiful. And I know when you were saying the part about the illustrating the story, I was thinking about one thing I have pledged to do better, and this year is how I can connect with more people about feminism. I decided to start taking language again. And so I'm taking French classes again, and grammaire, which is really painful for me, but I'm doing it so that I can learn to share and deepen my relationships with women and non-binary people around the world, to be a better person in solidarity. And so I was wondering, for our last takeaway, what is a thing that you feel like that you want to share with people around the globe? That's the thing for me, is I want to go back to my languages. I've studied French, Arabic, and Italian in my life, and I feel like I need to go back to that, because I think Americans specifically, we need to, on a whole, know more languages to be able.
I think learning languages is so important, because I'm French. I speak fluently French, but I also speak English, and speaking English has opened the world to me, because in France, we are like in the American, we just think, we are only French, the whole world is speaking French, But once you speak English, then there's so many things, and you get to hear other stories. And you get to, open your mind into new worlds, and it makes you grow, and see that you're not alone, but there's so much, I think, learning languages. I would like to learn Spanish, because I think there is another world that I have no clue, especially South America. I think would be really nice to know more about Spanish, understanding more the African stories over there, which I don't know much, because I don't speak the language. So it's,
I love that. And, since We still have yet to meet in person, but I can't wait until that day happens. I live in a Latinx and Afro-Latinx community in New York, so you should come here and we can both learn some Spanish together.
Yeah, nice.
And so I would love that, but I can't believe we're out of time for coming to a close now, but I want to say thank you so much for une belle histoire. And I'm just really excited to be your partner in this book and excited to deepen our connection, and also just to show the next generation that we can collaborate across borders and beyond borders.
Yeah, and subjects, it's not only in one country, but it's everywhere. We are connected.
We are connected. That is so beautiful. So with all of you, remember, as we say farewell to you tonight, we're connected. That's a way to end. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Joy Messenger, joining you all from Potawatomi land on the far north side of Chicago. I am the Director of Training and Leadership Development with the Funders for Justice Network.
Amazing. Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Connie with AAPI Women Lead as one of the co-founders and executive director. I am located in Oakland, California, Ohlone land, and I'm happy to be here with you. Thanks for having us.
I am really excited to be in this conversation with you today, Connie. I know that we are not going to have as much time to delve into all these issues as you could share, I am sure, and want to provide a little bit of framing for folks before we jump in. Over the past decade or so, there have been increased conversations about gender-based violence, especially along racialized lines. And so it's important as a women's funding community for us to be able to come together and talk about how to navigate and address gender-based violence, especially within Black, Indigenous, people of color communities, migrant and refugee communities, while also presenting alternatives to state intervention as the only solution, as those systems definitely can cause more harm for our communities and within our communities. So let's jump right into it, just to give you some time to share about the work that you've been doing and the communities that you're working with. So it'd be great for our audience if you could start off by sharing some of the biggest issues and opportunities that you are seeing right now, facing current and former sex workers, people who are currently or formerly incarcerated, and folks who are organizing for and around abolition of prisons and policing.
Mm-hmm. So thanks for the question, Joy. I also really appreciate the framing. I did want to make a slight suggestion, an addendum, or maybe an intervention around the framing. For a lot of our folks who have been doing anti-gender-based violence work, and many of whom are women, femme, non-binary communities of color, for decades, we've actually been saying that the state is the arbiter of violence. So less looking for alternatives to the state. Many of us are organizing to say that the state helps to create gender-based violence, and they also are perpetrators of gender-based violence. And many of our community members are survivors of their violence, right? In addition to the violence we experience at home, in the community, in the workplace. All of it for us is layered and intersectional, and the state helps to create the conditions by which mostly poor women, femme, non-binary communities are impacted by GBV. So I wanted to share that kind of intervention and help.
That's helpful reframing. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
And to that extent, you know, that means that under the conditions of COVID right now, a global pandemic by which inequalities are exacerbated and revealed, we see that some of the folks who are most harmed right now by state violence, interpersonal violence, continue to be sex workers, immigrant communities, refugee communities, Black, Indigenous communities, women, gender non-binary communities, folks who are formerly and currently incarcerated. You know, with COVID, what folks were seeing was that a lot of the people who are currently incarcerated were subject to and survivors of, and many of whom were dying of the virus, right? And not much attention was paid to that. So those of us who are organizers, abolitionist organizers, those of us who are criminal justice reformists or any in that group, we were understanding that many of our incarcerated communities were dying from the pandemic more than folks who are on the outside. And our communities were receiving, our folks inside are receiving less support, right? And that includes a lot of women, incarcerated women. That includes a lot of incarcerated non-binary communities who don't have access, right? And then we were also seeing that many, if not all, sex workers across the trades, whether that be, stripping or camming or, street-based work, were almost decimated by COVID, because not only was there lack of access to the business, right? But when everything shut down, people in the trade were not given the resources that other employees would have, right? So they're not given the worker compensation, they're not getting PP, whatever it is, those loans, right? And also being shunned in the healthcare system. So, and then also being hyper criminalized, right? So we saw what was going on with OnlyFans. We're seeing what was going on with Backpage, like all these things. So they're being heavily policed while they're being underserved. So those are two main populations that I think we need to look at. And then of course, like you mentioned, refugees, immigrants, Asian immigrants, Asian Americans were deeply impacted by COVID and the racism and the xenophobia and white supremacy ushered by the previous administration. And then Black Indigenous communities bore the brunt of the pandemic as well, right? So, it's kind of imperative that our funding network sees the intersections and see who has most been suffering and respond accordingly. Does that help to address the question in many words or less?
It does. Thank you. And, it's such a broad look at the issue. So I really appreciate your answer.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. So in that respect, I know that you've been doing this work for a really long time. So thank you. I do want to ask you, since you're actively involved with funders and are a funder yourself, how do you see funders be accountable to and help to address these concerns that I just laid out?
Yeah, that's also a really big question to answer, just because the intersection of the timeline of philanthropy and the timeline of state violence in this country really run in parallel and really go hand in hand. And I think it goes often without saying, but should be said here, that the wealth from philanthropy is from stolen land and stolen labor. And so goes back to the roots of the state as the implementer of gender-based violence, the state as the enactor of gender-based violence, as you had shared so well. I think is our responsibility as funders really comes from that place, and then really should push us to think about how we can divest from the systems that we are funding that may cause additional harm, while investing in solutions that feminist organizers, that sex workers, that current and formerly incarcerated people have been calling for decades, that don't involve the state, don't involve increased policing. I am new in my role at Funders for Justice, which is a national network of funders that is working at the intersections, working to address the intersections of racism, economic injustice, gender injustice, and criminalization. And so our goal is to move more resources, more new resources to grassroots and frontline organizers who are directly addressing anti-criminalization and abolition. And I think within that, when we think about gender-based violence, it's imperative for us to be having these conversations about how folks are looking at solutions that don't involve the state. The largest amount of money that is going to organizations addressing gender-based violence in our communities is often coming from the Violence Against Women Act, or VAWA, which is money directly from the government that requires a relationship with policing in the prison industrial complex, and often makes it impossible for organizers and healers and folks in our communities addressing gender-based violence to move away from systems of policing in prison. And so as funders, it's actually part of our duty in the redistribution of our funding to the communities that they were taken from, to the communities that resources were taken from. It's part of our responsibility to give those resources back to the communities that are working on abolition, that are working to end gender-based violence, and doing it through models of transformative justice, doing it through models of abolition, and other models that don't involve state intervention. Within Funders for Justice, we are a place where funders can come and learn how to shift their framing. We co-learn together, we take action, and we shift our funding. We have a particular strategy group that meets every month to discuss these issues, the challenges and opportunities of shifting and changing funding, that works in partnership with folks in movement who are working on these issues and bringing them and their funding needs to our network. And so we would invite folks to join us where they can learn and be supported in this work as funders and as organizers within their own institutions. And I will say also, previously to Funders for Justice, I was with a funder called Third Wave Fund, and our model of funding and supporting, in particular, sex worker-led organizing, really rerouted decision-making into a participatory model led by current and former sex workers. And those types of models, I think, are really important to the future of how philanthropy can be funding, not just organizations addressing gender-based violence outside the state, but also addressing many issues related to race, gender, class. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's helpful. And I know we're super short on time, so I think I'm just gonna share that at AAPI Women Lead, who loves and adores Third Wave and funders like you, Joy, is that we agree with the framework of giving things back, right? So as a Southeast Asian woman, our frame and a former sex worker whose family has been incarcerated, right? Who also happens to have a PhD, I am fully aware of what's been taken from our communities, right? From the war in Vietnam, imperialist wars here in the US, even what's going on in Haiti, Afghanistan. The framework that you laid out is one that I think is super important, which is essentially give things back to where things are due, right? So it's not only a reallocation of resources, but the modern state as it is survived on the backs of these people that Joy and I continue to talk about. And so our communities are not only deserving of more resources, I would argue that this nation state is indebted to us. So funders should probably, think through that as we recognize the resources we have available to us, where they come from, and where they should be going. So just want to share that. And I also want to give a shout out to like Survived and Punished, Love and Protect, Red Canary. These are organizations I hold dear to my heart in addition to our own, because they are survivor-centered, sex worker-centered, incarcerated people-centered. Even California Coalition for Women Prisoners. Those are people that I love and appreciate and hope you all take the time to learn from.
And with that note, we are at a close to Women Funded 2021. We are so humbled to have had nearly 400 participants from around the world, from 24 different countries, representing almost 5.9 billion in grant-making dollars here with us today on this very short one-day session, a one-day conference, a Women Funded 2021. There were over 108 executive leaders with us today, over 51% women of color. So you know, with that kind of percentage, you know there's going to be dancing at this revolution for sure. But because we can't all be together, we know that no matter what, there's going to be laughter, there's going to be art, there's going to be joy, and there's going to be stories that call us to action, and stories that fuel our collective and actions that fuel our collective stories. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you again for being with us today and bringing your whole heart and your whole selves to our collective movement. We know that together when we fight, together we win. Thank you again. We'll see you soon. Mark your calendars, September 2023, Women's Funded is coming back. And hopefully we'll all be back together. Thank you again.